All right. So today we are going to talk about the architecture of, and I put this in my mind in air quotes because I always have, but the word reality. So the architecture of reality is selective attention. At any point throughout your day, and it will vary a little bit depending on where you're at and what you're doing, but the human brain, in terms of sensory input. So again, sensory input, sight, sound, taste, touch, feeling, tactile touch. Oh, I said that. Yeah. But the human being is inputting over 11 million bits of data per second. And so, like, if you do some quick arithmetic, if you're good at that, then you know how many bits of information per minute or how many bits of information per hour is the human being being exposed to. Well, 11 million is actually a very large number. In today's world, it just doesn't seem to be. We have a comfortable word to describe 11 and then million. But to truly wrap your mind around that number, it can be a little bit tricky. But consciously, the human mind is able to recognize at any one point about 40 bits of data. So let's put those numbers a little bit into perspective. So we have 11 million bits of data per second. Depending on where you are, it can be more. If you're in a busy downtown metropolitan area, you're going to have more bits of data. And we like to start off with the need. You know, what is the need? How does this practice address a need? And then what can a person do about it? Well, the need is we are being essentially engulfed in these bits of data, this sensory perception at all times. And it has only gotten worse. We did actually talk about this a little bit in a previous discussion. It was very similar to what we're talking about now, that the human being is constantly being bombarded. And of those 11 million bits of bombardment, the human brain can sift through about 30 or 40 bits of that data. So those are two huge differences in numbers there, right? 40. 11 million bits per second, but we get 40. Maybe some people get 50. I don't know. They're advanced humans. But so the thing that we need to know, and I think there's a reason, and this next sentence is a reason that there's a ladybug on the screen, is that filtering isn't a bug. It's the system's core function. So without this system of filtering, the human being would be constantly oversaturated with exterior stimuli. Just imagine if you were in a restaurant or you were outside and you could just hear everything, you could see everything. It would be completely overwhelming for our nervous system. So the filter is a biological necessity. And it's not unique to human beings, of course. This is a an executive function, a type of thing that happens in the brains of other animals as well. The executive function, I guess, is what we'll be talking about shortly. And that's choosing which those 40 bits of data are going to be. Now, one of the things that I've talked about for a long time, years, in fact, is that when the amount, so if we have 40 bits of data coming in, what about the other, 10,999,960? What about the rest of that data? So it essentially doesn't exist to you. And I think I pinpointed this decades ago when I would say that, well, if you're not actively focusing on a person and feeling that connection with them actively in that moment, then that love is abstract. It's a hypothetical. It's in your mind. You say, "Oh, I love this person." Well, if you're not thinking about them, if they're not a part of your present moment, then anything that you were talking about conceptually just ceases to exist. It doesn't exist for you. So it's the same thing. Like when you have 11 million bits of data and you're only taking in 40, the remaining bits of data basically just it doesn't exist. You have no recollection of it. You have no recognition. Your brain hasn't formulated it into something that it can recognize. What is being ignored is effectively it just doesn't exist for you. And remember that this ignoring factor, it's not an active process. It can be, especially if we're practicing Qigong, but by and large, for most people, this is a completely unconscious process. This whole filtering and what bits of information come in and what don't. And then I'm sure and this is the reason I put the word reality in air quotes, is because we don't really see the world as it is. We see the world as it's being filtered, as it's being constructed from our mind. Our mind has to construct what it is we think we're seeing, what it is we think that we're experiencing. And this is actually a common theme, and I'm sure you've heard it before, but that we're not really seeing and experiencing the full spectrum of what's available. We're only getting a sliver of it. And that's true. You know, light has an incredible electromagnetic spectrum. It could be infinite. It's likely infinite, but we can only see a sliver of it. And we call that visible light.